The wind howled across the cliffs of Ravensbrook, carrying the scent of salt, rain, and decay. The sea below roared endlessly, crashing against the jagged rocks as if warning every living thing to stay away. Through the thick fog, a single car wound its way up the narrow road until it stopped before a towering, time-worn house that had stood there for more than a century. Evelyn Parker stepped out, her coat whipping in the wind. She stared at the mansion, her late grandmother's house, its once white walls now faded to gray. Ivy crawling up its sides like veins of something long dead but still alive enough to reach. The windows were dark, reflecting nothing but the storm clouds rolling above. For years, Evelyn had avoided coming here. She grew up hearing stories that her grandmother talked to someone who wasn't there. That lights flickered even when the power was out. That voices whispered when the house was silent. But when the lawyer called last month, saying she was the last living heir, she knew she had no choice. She pushed open the creaking front door. The air inside was stale, heavy, and filled with the faint smell of lavender and dust. The wooden floors groaned beneath her boots. Old portraits lined the hallway, every face watching her as if remembering something she had forgotten. Home, she whispered, though it didn't feel like one. She spent hours cleaning the first floor, opening curtains and windows to let in what little daylight remained. The storm outside grew worse, thunder shaking the glass panes. In the living room stood an old grandfather clock, still ticking softly, though no one had wound it in years. It showed 11:47 p.m. As Evelyn unpacked her bag, she noticed a thin door at the end of the hall. Behind it, a staircase spiraled upward. The attic. She hesitated. Her grandmother's will had mentioned something about keeping the attic locked after dark. But the key had been tied to the deed, as if meant to find her. With a deep breath, she climbed the narrow steps. Dust floated like ghosts in the beam of her flashlight. The attic smelled of paper and rain-soaked wood. Boxes were stacked neatly against the wall. Marked with dates from the 1800s, on a small writing desk by the window, sat a leather-bound diary, untouched. Yet strangely preserved. Evelyn ran her fingers over its cover. The leather was cool to the touch, almost damp, as if it had just been handled. She opened it carefully. The first page was dated October 12, 1894. The nights grow longer. The house whispers again. It calls my name. The name at the bottom of the page read Eliza Thorne. Evelyn frowned. She'd never heard the name before. The entries continued, each one more unsettling. Eliza describing shadows moving when she was alone. Doors opening to rooms that hadn't existed before. And dreams of drowning in ink. When Evelyn reached the last page, her breath caught in her throat. The ink looked fresh, glistening under the flashlight. It read, "It writes when the clock strikes 12. It remembers every soul that ever lived within these walls. And tonight, it will write again." Evelyn's heart pounded. She glanced at her watch, 11:59 p.m. She shut the diary and turned toward the stairs. But the wind outside slammed a shutter against the wall. The sound made her jump, nearly dropping her flashlight. She steadied herself and whispered, "It's just the storm." Then the clock downstairs chimed midnight. 1, 2, 3. The air grew colder with each toll. The beam of her flashlight flickered. And then a sound. A faint, deliberate scratching from behind her. She turned slowly. The diary lay open again, though she hadn't touched it. Its pages fluttered as if caught in an invisible wind. She stepped closer. Words were appearing slowly, letter by letter, written by no visible hand. "Welcome home, Evelyn." She stumbled back, her flashlight trembling in her grip. "What is this?" she whispered. But the words kept coming, as if the diary was alive. "You came back just like she did. Just like all of them do." Her breath fogged in the freezing air. Somewhere deep in the house, a door slammed. The sound echoed through the walls like a warning. She grabbed the diary, intending to throw it away, but as soon as she touched it, the ink bled across the page, lines twisting, forming a new sentence before her eyes. "Don't run. It's already begun." The candle on the desk suddenly lit itself, a thin blue flame flickering wildly. In its glow, Evelyn saw something reflected in the window. A figure standing behind her. She spun around. No. One. Only darkness and the faint smell of lavender. Drifting closer, downstairs, the clock continued to chime long after midnight. The storm raged harder, the sea crashing violently against the rocks. And in the attic, Evelyn stood frozen beside the diary, unable to move, unable to scream as one final line appeared in crimson ink. At midnight, the house writes its own story. Tonight, you are part of it. Asterisk, the storm had quieted by dawn, leaving behind a heavy silence that clung to the house like fog. Evelyn Parker hadn't slept. She sat in the parlor, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the leather-bound diary resting on the table before her. The last thing she remembered was the ink twisting across the page like a living thing, spelling her name. And that final sentence, tonight. You are part of it. Now the diary looked ordinary again, its pages blank and calm, as though mocking her disbelief. She told herself it had been exhaustion, her mind playing tricks after a long drive and too little rest. But deep down, she knew what she saw was real at sunrise. She decided to test it. Evelyn fetched a pen from her bag and opened the diary to a clean page. She wrote carefully, "Who are you?" The ink barely dried before the words bled outward, as if the paper itself was breathing. Slowly, new words formed beneath her question. I am the one who remembers. Her pulse quickened. Remembers what? She whispered. Another pause. Then more letters appeared, drawn by an unseen hand. Everything that happens inside these walls. Every scream. Every secret. Every death. The pen dropped from her hand. Evelyn snapped the diary shut and backed away, heart pounding. She wanted to leave, to run out the door and never come back. But something in her refused. Curiosity or fate, when she finally gathered the courage to open the book again. The ink had changed. The new message read, "Don't be afraid, Evelyn. I was hers before I was yours." Hers, she muttered. Who are you talking about? The diary responded, Eliza. The name from the attic. The woman who had written those entries over a century ago. Evelyn felt a chill crawl down her spine. Later that afternoon, she explored the house, hoping to distract herself. Dust-covered furniture and faded wallpaper filled every room. In her grandmother's old study, she found dozens of letters tied with black ribbon, all written in elegant cursive. The first one was dated 1901, addressed to Mrs. Eliza Thorne. The letter read, "If you are still seeing her reflection in the mirror, burn the diary. It belongs to the house, not to you." Evelyn's fingers trembled as she read it. The sender's name was illegible, smeared by time, but the message was clear. The diary was dangerous. She turned toward the mirror that hung above the fireplace. Its surface was clouded, dust-covered, but faintly she thought she saw movement behind her. A flicker of someone standing just out of view. When she turned around, nothing. Get a grip, she told herself. It's an old house, that's all. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching that night. The air in the house grew cold again. The grandfather clock struck 12, its sound echoing like a heartbeat. Evelyn sat upright in bed, the diary lying open on her nightstand. The first letter began to form before her eyes. The ink will move when the truth stirs. You asked who I am. I will show you. The candle beside the bed flickered. Ink began to flow from the diary, spreading across the wooden surface like black veins. It pooled into a shape, words rearranging, bleeding into a sketch. A drawing. Evelyn leaned closer. It was a woman, long hair, hollow eyes, standing in front of a window. Beneath it, another sentence formed. She never left the house. A soft creak came from the corner of the room. Evelyn turned her head slowly and froze. By the window stood a figure. Faint, like smoke. A woman in an old-fashioned dress, her face pale and distant. Evelyn's throat tightened, her body refusing to move. The woman's mouth moved, but no sound came. Then, her voice whispered inside Evelyn's head, "You shouldn't have opened it." The diary snapped shut on its own. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Evelyn fumbled for her phone, turned on its flashlight. The room was empty. The figure was gone. Only the diary remained on the bed, a faint warmth radiating from its cover. The next morning, Evelyn tried to leave. She packed her things and rushed to her car, but the engine refused to start. Not a sound. Her phone showed no signal. She screamed in frustration, slamming her hands against the steering wheel. When she looked back at the house, a shape was standing in the upstairs window. The same figure. Watching her, she stumbled out of the car and ran toward the front door, shouting, "What do you want from me?" The door creaked open by itself. On the floor inside, the diary lay open again. The ink was moving, flowing fast, urgent, writing something over and over. Asterisk, find what she hid, or you'll take her place. Evelyn stared at the words, her breath shallow. Beneath that message, a final line appeared. Written in a deeper red, it begins in the mirror. The ink shimmered wet, almost alive, and then started dripping off the page. Crawling toward the mirror across the hall, Evelyn followed its trail, her reflection trembling in the glass. For a split second, she saw herself smiling, but her mouth hadn't moved. She whispered, terrified, "What are you?" And her reflection whispered back in Eliza's voice, "I'm the memory that never died." The next morning arrived, gray and cold, as if the sun itself refused to shine on the house at Ravensbrook. Evelyn Parker sat by the kitchen window, clutching a cup of untouched coffee. The night's events still echoed through her mind, the whisper in her own voice. The reflection that smiled when she didn't. The diary lay on the table, closed but humming faintly, as if something inside it was breathing. Every instinct told her to destroy it, to end whatever nightmare it had begun. But the last message burned in her memory. Find what she hid, or you'll take her place. She turned toward the mirror hanging above the fireplace, tall, ornate, framed in dark wood that shimmered faintly even in the dull morning light. She remembered the diary's final line from last night. It begins in the mirror. Evelyn approached it slowly. Her reflection looked pale, haunted, but it was hers. For now, she raised her hand to touch the glass. It was ice cold. Beneath her fingertips, she thought she felt something pulse, like a heartbeat coming from the other side. "Who are you?" she whispered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then faint letters began to etch themselves across the glass, forming in a swirl of mist. Eliza Thorne. Evelyn gasped. "You're real," she said softly. "You're trapped here?" The mist shifted again, writing more words. "I was, until you came back." "Back?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "I've never been here before. You were born of the house. Your grandmother knew. She left it for you." Evelyn's hands trembled. "My grandmother." Before the mirror could answer, a sudden chill swept through the room. The diary flipped open on the table behind her, pages fluttering wildly as if caught in a storm. Ink spilled across the paper, forming frantic sentences that seemed almost alive. She lied. The mirror holds what she took. Find the hidden room. Evelyn spun around, the echo of a distant door creaking somewhere above her. The sound came from the attic. Again she hesitated, remembering the voice. The candle that lit itself, the diary that wrote her name. Every part of her screamed to leave. But something stronger pulled her up the stairs, the same invisible pull that had drawn her grandmother decades ago. The attic was dim, the air thick with dust. Sunlight filtered weakly through the window, revealing the diary's ink stains still smeared across the old desk. Evelyn scanned the floorboards carefully this time. Her grandmother had spent much of her final years up here, writing letters that were never sent. Something glimmered under the floor near the desk. Evelyn knelt down, brushing aside the dust. A small brass key lay half buried in the wood. She picked it up, and as she did, the grandfather clock downstairs began to chime. Even though it was far from midnight, each chime rattled the floor. The diary on the desk slid open by itself. New words formed. The key fits the mirror. Evelyn froze. What kind of mirror needs a key? As if in answer, a low groan came from behind her. The sound of shifting wood. The mirror in the corner of the attic, covered in a white sheet. Quivered. Evelyn slowly pulled the cloth away. Beneath it was another mirror, older, cracked at the edges, its glass faintly fogged as if holding breath. Along the bottom she noticed a small brass keyhole. It's almost invisible in the pattern of the frame. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "This can't be real," she whispered, but her hand moved anyway. Slotting the key in dot, the mirror clicked dot. The surface rippled, not like glass breaking, but like water disturbed by a stone. Evelyn stumbled backward as her reflection shimmered. Then changed. It was no longer her reflection. It was Eliza Thorne. Her face was ghostly pale, her eyes deep pools of sorrow. She stood in a room that looked just like the attic, except cleaner, brighter, and alive. Evelyn watched in shock as Eliza pressed her hands against the inside of the mirror. Her lips moved soundlessly, but the diary on the desk began to shake violently. It opened again. Words scrawled rapidly across its pages in deep crimson ink. "She bound me here. Your grandmother. She used me to live." Evelyn's breath caught. "What do you mean she used you?" The diary replied instantly. "She took my years, my soul. Every time she wrote, I grew weaker. The house fed on me." Evelyn staggered backward, her mind spinning. Her grandmother, the quiet, kind woman who raised her, had been writing in this diary until the day she died. What if those words hadn't been hers at all? "Then what do you want from me?" she whispered. The ink moved slower this time, as if the answer took effort. "Free me. Break the mirror. Or the house will claim you next." Before Evelyn could react, the mirror's surface began to pulse violently. Eliza's reflection looked terrified. She pressed her palms against the glass, shaking her head. The house groaned, the kind of sound wood makes before it breaks. Dust fell from the ceiling. The clock below struck once, then twice. Though it wasn't midnight. "It's waking up," the diary wrote. "It doesn't want to let me go." Evelyn grabbed the brass lamp from the desk, raised it high, and swung it toward the mirror. The glass shattered into 1,000 silver shards that rained across the floor. Silence, then a scream. Not from the house, not from the wind, but from somewhere deep inside the walls. A scream that sounded both ancient and alive. The diary slammed shut on its own. The brass key rolling away into the shadows. Evelyn gasped for breath, staring at the broken mirror. But as the dust cleared, she saw something that froze her blood. Her reflection was still standing there whole, perfect, unbroken. And it smiled. The mirror was shattered, yet her reflection still stared back. Evelyn Parker froze where she stood, heart hammering against her ribs. The shards of broken glass glittered across the attic floor, catching faint traces of moonlight. But in every piece, her reflection moved slightly, differently. Some fragments showed her standing still. Others showed her smiling. And one shard near her foot showed her reflection turning its head when she hadn't moved at all. Evelyn backed away slowly. No, this isn't real," she whispered. "You're gone. You're not me." But the reflection in that shard tilted its head further too far, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Then it grinned. The attic door behind her slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house, shaking dust from the rafters. Evelyn ran to the door and yanked the handle. It wouldn't budge. The diary on the desk fluttered open, pages rustling like wings. Ink poured across the paper, moving fast, desperate. "It's awake. The house has chosen." "What do you mean, chosen?" Evelyn shouted, trembling. The diary responded immediately, as if it could hear her fear. "Every century it takes one. You freed her. So it took you." Evelyn's stomach turned to ice. The room felt smaller now, the air colder. Like the house was closing in around her. She grabbed the diary, holding it tight. "No, I'm leaving. I'm not playing your game." But as she descended the stairs, the walls around her began to change. Wallpaper peeled away to reveal old wooden panels beneath teach, etched with faint words, names carved deep into the grain. She ran her fingers across them, feeling the grooves. Eliza Thorne, Margaret Parker. and beneath them a new line forming on its own fresh. Wet ink sinking into the wood. Evelyn Parker. She stumbled back, eyes wide. No, the whisper came again, close to her ear. You can't leave. You belong here now. Evelyn spun around, her breath quick and shallow. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the grandfather clock at the end of the corridor. It was ticking again, louder than before. 12 chimes. Even though it was nowhere near midnight. Tick-tock tick. Each second pulsed through the walls like a heartbeat. She moved toward the front door, clutching the diary like a weapon. When she reached the handle, she turned it, but the door led not outside, but to another hallway. The same hallway. Same portraits. Same carpet. She gasped and turned around, but behind her was only more darkness. The front door was gone. The diary's pages turned themselves. The house is rewriting time. You're inside its memory now. Her knees weakened. Then how do I stop it? She whispered. Find what the mirror kept, before it becomes you. The words burned into the page like fire, glowing faintly before fading back into ink. Evelyn swallowed hard and turned toward the stairs again. In the attic, the shards of mirror had begun to move. They slid across the wooden floor like pieces drawn by magnetism, pulling together, slowly rebuilding the reflection piece by piece. Evelyn didn't see it yet, but something was coming through. When she returned, the attic air was heavier, colder. Her breath fogged before her. The shards now formed half a mirror, cracked, but recognizable. In it, her reflection was complete again, though her own face looked pale. Lifeless, and the reflection moved first. It raised its hand even before she did. It smiled wider this time. Then a voice not from the diary, but from the mirror itself, slid through the air like silk. You broke what held me. Now I can wear you. Evelyn's pulse raced. Eliza. No, the voice said. Eliza's free. I am what fed on her. I am the house. The shards trembled, vibrating on the floor. One by one, they began to rise, levitating, circling Evelyn like tiny pieces of glass orbiting a planet. The light in the attic flickered, growing dimmer. The diary snapped open again. Its ink formed one word. Run. Evelyn bolted down the stairs, shards of mirror following her like silent, glinting daggers. She reached the living room just as the clock began to chime again. Each chime made the air heavier, harder to breathe. The diary fell from her hands. A voice echoed from all directions, walls, floor, even ceiling. You're part of the story now, Evelyn. Don't you see? The house doesn't need to haunt you. It only needs to remember you. The mirror shards fell around her, embedding themselves in the floor and walls, forming smaller reflections. Dozens of Evelyns stared back, each slightly different. One smiled. One cried. One mouthed silent words she couldn't understand. Then, one of them blinked. Evelyn's scream tore through the empty house as the reflection stepped forward. Out of the glass and into the room, identical in every detail except for the eyes. They were darker, hollow, and full of something ancient. The duplicate tilted its head. The same eerie motion Evelyn had seen in the attic. The story needs a new ending, it said softly, before Evelyn could move. Her reflection lunged, hands gripping her shoulders with icy strength. The lights flickered, the air split with sound, and everything went black. When the silence returned, only one Evelyn stood in the living room. She brushed the dust off her coat, her lips curling into a small, unnatural smile in the shattered fragments at her feet. Her reflection was gone. The diary, lying open beside the clock, wrote one final line in blood-red ink. The house remembers. When Evelyn Parker opened her eyes, she was no longer in the living room. The air was heavy, thick, like fog, but shimmering faintly, as if the space itself was made of old memory. Everything around her looked familiar, yet wrong. The walls, the furniture, even the clock, they all existed but slightly distorted, bending inward like reflections on water. She touched her face, cold. Her fingers left no warmth. She pressed her hand to the wall and it rippled under her touch. It wasn't wood anymore. It was glass. A whisper echoed softly around her. "You shouldn't have looked too long." Evelyn spun around. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere. Through the shimmering surface of the mirror, she could see her living room, the real one. And standing there, calm and composed, was her reflection. The reflection smiled sweetly, tilting its head. "You're safe now, Evelyn. I'm taking care of everything." Evelyn slammed her fists against the glass. "Let me out." Her reflection stepped closer on the other side, eyes gleaming darker than before. "You don't understand. The house remembers everyone who's ever lived here. It's not cruel. It's hungry. Someone must stay to keep it alive." "Ah, I didn't free you for this." Evelyn screamed. "You didn't free me," her reflection said softly. "You freed it." The lights in the real world flickered as Evelyn's reflection walked toward the grandfather clock. It touched the glass and time itself seemed to stutter. The second hand twitched forward, then back. With every tick, Evelyn felt her chest tighten. Like her heartbeat was no longer hers. The reflection whispered, "Every soul the house has taken lives inside its walls. Listen." Evelyn pressed her ear against the glass. Faintly, beneath the hum of the mirror, she heard something. Voices. Dozens, hundreds of them. Whispering names, pleading, crying, laughing. The sound was endless. The murmurs of people long dead but never gone. She backed away, trembling. No, this can't be happening. The diary appeared on the other side, floating gently in midair. It opened by itself. The ink began to write without hands. "The house remembers all. The walls are stories. The blood is ink." Evelyn's voice cracked. "You're lying." But deep inside, she could feel it every heartbeat. Every memory in this place belonged to something ancient. Something alive inside the mirror. Evelyn wandered through endless rooms, each more unreal than the last. One moment she stood in the parlor, the next in her grandmother's study. Each space repeated in a loop. A memory replaying itself on a table. She found a cup of tea, warm, fresh, waiting. She looked down at it. The reflection of her hand trembled on the liquid surface. For a brief second, the tea shimmered, showing not her face, but another woman's. Eliza Thorne. Eliza's pale reflection met Evelyn's gaze from within the cup. Her voice whispered, soft as the tide, "You freed me, but now you must finish what I could not." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Tell me how. Tell me how to stop this." Liza's voice came again, echoing through the mirrored world. "The diary feeds the house. Every word written binds another soul. Destroy it and the house will fade. But you must act before it writes your ending." Evelyn's breath hitched. The diary, the cursed object that had followed her every step. It wasn't a record of the house's memories. It was the house on the other side of the glass. Evelyn's reflection, now wearing her body, moved gracefully through the house. She opened doors, smiled at the portraits, and whispered softly, "Everything is in order again." When she reached the diary, she dipped a quill into a small jar of black ink and began to write. Evelyn Parker lived a quiet life in Ravensbrook until she vanished without a trace. Her reflection was the only one left behind. As the words formed, Evelyn screamed from inside the mirror, banging her fists against the surface. The world around her flickered and began to shrink. Every line written in that book pulled her further away, erasing her. "No," she cried, "stop." The reflection paused. Its eyes softened, almost pitying. "Stories need endings, Evelyn. The house can't exist without one." But Evelyn wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. She looked around the mirrored space, searching, desperate, and saw the faint outline of the brass key she had once used to unlock the attic mirror. It shimmered beneath the glassy floor, half buried in rippling light. She dove for it. The surface of the mirror rippling like water. Her fingers closed around the key, burning cold in her hand. The whispers grew louder, voices urging her on. Break the cycle, end the story. Free us. Evelyn pressed the key against the wall of glass. It began to glow. Cracks spread outward like spiderwebs, light bleeding through. Her reflection froze, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" Evelyn's voice trembled but fierce. "Rewriting the ending." The glass shattered light exploded from every direction. The reflections screamed, the diary burst open, and the ink inside boiled, spilling across the pages like liquid shadow. The sound of the house groaning filled the air. Every clock chiming at once, Evelyn was thrown backward into light, into silence, and then nothing. When the world settled, the house stood empty again. The diary lay on the floor, pages blank, except for one final line written in Evelyn's handwriting. "The house remembers no more." Outside, the wind howled softly across the cliffs. The sea was calm for the first time in 100 years, and somewhere deep within the mirrors, fractured remains. A faint reflection blinked, not trapped, not screaming, just smiling, finally free. The sea had grown quiet. The wind no longer howled against the cliffs of Ravensbrook. For nearly 15 years, the Parker house stood abandoned, its windows boarded, its doors chained shut. Locals avoided it crossing the street rather than look too long at its shadow. They said the air around it still felt alive, that sometimes, at night, the sound of a clock could be heard ticking from within. Then, one autumn evening, Daniel Hargrove, a novelist from the city, arrived in town. He was tired of people, of noise, of fame that felt hollow. His last book had failed, his marriage had ended, and his name had become just another forgotten headline. He came to Ravensbrook seeking silence, a place to write again. The real estate agent hesitated before showing him the house. "It's not been lived in for some time," she said carefully, avoiding his eyes. "I like quiet places," Daniel replied. She only nodded, handing him the rusted key. The house greeted him with the smell of dust and old rain. The walls groaned faintly, as if remembering footsteps. The furniture had been covered long ago with white sheets, and the once grand fireplace stood cold and dark. He set his suitcase down and sighed. "Perfect," he muttered to himself. "A house with history." That night, as the fog rolled in from the cliffs, Daniel sat in the parlor with a glass of whiskey and a notebook. He could already feel his mind clearing, silence wrapped around him like comfort. For the first time in years, the words began to return. He wrote about solitude, about ghosts, about the echo of people who never left. But then, as he turned a page, his pen stopped moving, because there, resting on the desk before him, was another book, one he hadn't brought, a leather-bound diary. Its surface looked newly polished, the cover faintly warm to the touch. Daniel frowned. "That's strange." He opened it. The first page was blank. The second was not. "Welcome home, Daniel." He blinked, startled. "What the hell?" He turned the page. "It's been waiting for someone who listens." Daniel closed the diary quickly, forcing a laugh to shake off the unease. "Probably some weird joke from the realtor," he said aloud. But there was no one to answer, only the soft ticking of the old clock by the wall. He set the diary aside and went to bed. Sometime after midnight, Daniel awoke to a faint scratching sound, like a quill on paper. Asterisk, he sat up. The sound was coming from downstairs. He hesitated, then grabbed the flashlight from his nightstand and crept down the steps. The house was dark except for a dim glow coming from the parlor. The diary was open again. Its pages were turning on their own, each one filling with ink that appeared out of nothing. Daniel stepped closer, flashlight trembling in his hand. The writing was elegant, looping a woman's handwriting. "I remember the sea. I remember the wind. I remember the girl who freed me." Daniel's pulse quickened. He whispered. The diary continued to write. "Her name was Evelyn. The house forgot her for a while. But I did not." "Evelyn," Daniel repeated softly, scanning the room. "Who are you?" "I am the ink," the diary answered, the words appearing as he spoke. "And I remember Daniel stepped back, breath shallow. "This isn't real. I'm dreaming." The fireplace flared to life, blue flames crackling without wood or spark. The air thickened with the scent of salt and lavender. A shadow passed across the mirror above the mantel. It wasn't his. The next morning, Daniel woke on the floor, unsure how long he had been there. The diary sat beside him, closed. He considered leaving, packing his things, and driving away, but curiosity burned deeper than fear. He began to read through the pages. Most were filled with strange, disjointed memories, a woman named Elisa, another named Evelyn, and countless entries about a house that ate what it loved. By afternoon, Daniel was certain this diary was old. Too old, the dates stretched back over a century. But the last few pages were different. New, fresh ink. The house sleeps, but the ink dreams. And dreams need someone to write them. He slammed the diary shut. "Not this time," he muttered. That night. He locked it in a drawer and tried to write his own story. Something about loss and isolation. But every time his pen touched paper, the words twisted into something else. His own handwriting changed. "She's behind you." Daniel froze. He turned slowly toward the mirror. At first, it reflected only the dim light of his lamp. Then movement. A faint figure standing just behind him. A woman's silhouette. He spun around. No one. But when he looked back at the mirror, she was closer, pale, hollow-eyed. Her lips moved without sound, and then, faintly, he heard it. Daniel's name. Whispered from nowhere. The drawer burst open. The diary flew out, pages fluttering wildly. The ink bled faster, letters clawing at the page. The story never ended. It only waited. "You found the house again? It will write for us now." The lights flickered. The wind outside howled like voices returning from the deep. Daniel backed away as the mirror rippled. The woman's face breaking through like water disturbed. He reached for the diary, shouting, "What do you want from me?" The ink formed one last line before the pages went black. "To be remembered." The glass shattered dot and the house at Ravensbrook was alive again. The storm returned on the 7th night. Wind screamed over the cliffs. Waves crashed against the rocks, and the house at Ravensbrook groaned like a beast awakening from its slumber. Daniel Hargrove sat in the parlor, his face pale and sleepless. The flickering firelight casting twisted shadows on the walls. The diary lay open before him. Its pages were full now, every one written in his handwriting, though he didn't remember writing a single word. He whispered to himself, "I just wanted to write again." The ink shimmered faintly in response, forming new words as if hearing him. "You did? You're part of the story now." Daniel pushed his chair back, shaking his head. "No, not like this. You're not real." The wind howled louder, rattling the window panes. From the corner of the room, the mirror began to hum that deep, almost living sound he'd heard every night since the diary found him. He turned toward it slowly. The reflection that stared back was not his own. Evelyn stood there. The woman from the diary. From the whispers. Her eyes were calm, mournful. She mouthed his name, and though he couldn't hear her voice, he understood. The ink remembers, but it can be forgotten. Daniel rose to his feet, heart pounding. How? Tell me how to stop this. The answer came not from Evelyn, but from the diary itself. The pages flipped violently, the ink bleeding faster than before. The sea keeps what the house cannot. Return me to the beginning. Daniel glanced toward the window. Beyond the glass, the storm churned, the ocean black and endless, waves slamming against the cliffs below. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. The sea? He whispered. That's where it started. That's where it ends. He grabbed the diary, ignoring the burn that seared his skin as he touched it. The ink pulsed through the cover like veins. As he stepped toward the door, the house began to fight back. The floorboards twisted, walls groaning, lights flickering out one by one. The air filled with whispers, hundreds of voices, desperate and pleading. Don't leave us. Stay. We remember you, Daniel. He stumbled forward, gripping the banister as the front door loomed ahead, the same door that had refused to open before. Now it was wide open, the storm howling through it like an open mouth. He ran into the rain. The cold wind cut into his face, and the cliffs below glowed faintly from the lightning flashing across the sky. The sea roared wild, furious, calling. He reached the edge, holding the diary tight against his chest. It was heavy now, impossibly heavy, as if carrying every word, every soul it had stolen. He shouted into the storm, "You wanted a writer? Then finish the story." He hurled the diary into the ocean. For a moment, nothing happened. The waves swallowed it whole, and silence fell between lightning strikes. Then the sea began to glow. The water churned violently, waves twisting upward like hands reaching for the sky. The wind screamed through the air, and the house on the cliff shuddered as if in pain. Windows shattered. The ground trembled from within the storm. Daniel heard voices, Eliza's, Evelyn's, dozens of others rising in a single echoing chorus. "Thank you." A brilliant flash of light erupted from the sea, illuminating the house one last time. Then darkness. When the sun rose the next morning, the cliffs were silent again. The ocean was calm, waves whispering gently against the rocks. But the house was gone. Only the outline of its foundation remained, half buried in wet earth. Of Daniel Hargrove, there was no sign, only his notebook, found at the edge of the cliff, soaked but intact inside it. The last page bore a single line written in his shaky handwriting. "I didn't end the story. The story ended me." Weeks later, a fisherman walking along the shore found something strange caught in his net, a small leather-bound book, its cover torn but miraculously dry. He turned it over in his hands and frowned. The title was faint but still readable, "The Diary That Wrote Itself." Curious, he opened it. Every page was blank until he reached the very last one. There, written in deep black ink, were two fresh words: "Welcome back." The fisherman blinked. When he looked again, the words were gone. He shrugged, slipped the diary into his bag, and walked toward the village as the sky darkened once more. Behind him, on the cliffs where the Parker house once stood, the faint sound of a ticking clock echoed through the wind. Slow, steady, patient, tick-tock, tick-dot, and beneath the whispering waves, ink began to move again,